It looks like things might have slowed down a little bit, so we're going to go ahead and get started out of respect for the time that you're committing to join us for this webinar today about the Duke Regular Decision Admissions Cycle. My name is Kathy Phillips. I'm the Interim Dean of Undergraduate Admissions here at Duke. I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Ann Shostrom, Director of Undergraduate Admissions and our expert on all things international. And I've already seen some of you joining us from countries outside the U.S. We wish you all a good afternoon, evening, morning, whatever time it may be in whatever time zone you're in today. Out of respect for your time, also, we are going to try to limit this webinar to just 30 minutes. We appreciate for some of you, this is lunch break. For others of you, you have many other duties to get back to. But we do really appreciate your joining us and allowing us to have a chance to share with you some news about our regular decision cycle, give you a sense of where things might land, our timetables, and so forth. So we'll go ahead and get started with some important notes about the admissions cycle this year. There we go. Our decisions will be released next Tuesday, March 31st at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Your students will also be getting an email from Duke today that will give them that information as well as instructions on how they can log in to their applicant portals and view their admissions decisions. And we always like to remind folks that they should make sure they have all of their correct login information well in advance of next Tuesday so that they can join and get their decisions in a timely manner. So to dive right into things, we did receive nearly 56,000 regular decision applications this year, which is an increase of almost 10% over last year. And that gave us a total of over 61,000 applications, which is a record for Duke. And I just have to note how very fortunate we are to have such wonderful interest from students all around the country and around the world. There's that popular phrase, embarrassment of riches, and that is truly the case. We are so fortunate to have so many students who would like to make Duke, possibly make Duke their home for the next 4 years. Of course, with that will come some very difficult decisions, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Our increase in applicants was from both international and US-based students, so nothing really stopping international students from deciding to come at least apply to study in the US. We also saw that increase across both of our undergraduate colleges, Trinity College of Arts and Sciences and the Pratt School of Engineering. We also think it's important to note that we received applications from students attending 15,000 different high schools through this admission cycle. That's an important thing to note because I know that for most of you, your world is in your school or your district or your region or state. And it's very hard sometimes to understand perhaps why we aren't going to be acting favorably on behalf of some of your most outstanding students. But when we will end up enrolling a first year class of about 1,775 students from students, fewer than 3,000 students total admitted through our early and regular processes, that's really where some of those difficult decisions come in. Next slide. So here are the numbers that you're all waiting for. And for any colleagues that might be joining us a little bit later, we are going to keep those stats on the left side of the slide, sort of running throughout the rest of our presentation. So as last year, we do anticipate a regular decision admit rate of less than 5%. So very, very competitive process for students who are coming to us with outstanding resumes, outstanding academic profiles, but we are going to be making some difficult decisions. You'll also see that the anticipated rate for our early decision defers is about 15%. And so we'll talk in a moment about where that difference lies and where that comes from. And then we do anticipate going out with about 2,500 waitlist offers. And while that number may be high, I think it's also addressing the fact that there are so many outstanding students that we would like to offer a chance of admission to. And usually fewer than half of the students to whom we make waitlist offers elect to stay on the waiting list. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. And again, the decision release date is posted there. Because counselors often want to know, and students want to know, of course, too, about early decision versus regular decision, I think it's important to note that we admit just under half of the class through our early decision and QuestBridge process. So this year we admitted over 100 QuestBridge applications, and QuestBridge, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is a program where students apply through the QuestBridge through a match process, through QuestBridge and for a match process. And then the early decision students, of course, are recognizing that Duke is their top choice. They are making a commitment to enroll at Duke if they are admitted. We have seen over the past 3 cycles or so that our early decision candidates are looking very strong, often just as strong, if not stronger, than some of our regular decision applicants. Thus, the decision to admit some more of those than we have in the past, and that 15% admit rate. Go into the next slide. And if you don't mind jumping in here and leading some of this discussion.
Sure. So the test optional policy that applied to this year's process will apply again for next year. That has nothing to do with decision release this year, but we want to be clear in conveying that to you as you work with students who are about to enter this whole process. We also wanted to talk about financial aid just a little bit with a reminder that, thank you, with a reminder that for U.S. citizens, U.S. lawful permanent residents, DACA and undocumented students, and eligible non-citizens, our admissions process does not penalize students in any way for indicating on their applications that they will seek financial aid. We are considering all of those applications in exactly the same way, whether they apply early or regular. For foreign citizens not in those categories that I just mentioned, we do consider whether those students are seeking financial aid precisely because we have a promise to all students we admit that we will meet their full demonstrated need for all 4 years. And so we do have those 2 different pools. The vast majority of our students are in the pool in which we do. I'm trying really hard not to say need blind here because, of course, we consider context in every application, but we do not penalize students in the categories listed here for applying for financial aid. I think a testament to that, going back to something Kathy said just a moment ago about early decision, we admitted 847 students through early decision this year, including students in all the categories that we just listed, as well as foreign citizens receiving financial aid. Every single one of those 847 students has enrolled. So we really believe very, very firmly in making Duke possible through our financial aid packages. We want to be clear about that. We also really want to be clear about the fact that we continue, as we always have, to read every single application. We, ourselves, human beings here on our staff, or everyone's talking about the uses of AI, and we're exploring those. We're interested in all the ways in which we can make our process more efficient. But when it comes to the assessment of applications, when it comes to thinking about human beings who will become a part of our community, we are not using AI in any way in our admissions process. As I referred to just a minute ago, we do think about context. We think about the opportunities and constraints that characterize every student's experiences. We think about who they are in the context of their families, their schools, their communities. All of that is really, really difficult to do other than through a human process. And so we really deeply appreciate all that you have done in your work, contributing to their applications, advocating for them, and helping us understand every applicant in the context of those various lenses.
And I'm going to just chime in. I saw a question pop up in chat, which is actually something that we had been prepared to say, which is that about 75% of Duke's athletic recruits were also part of that early decision student number that we shared. And so when you combine that with QuestBridge, roughly 25% of our early decision spaces were filled by either athletes or our QuestBridge match students. And so while there's certainly a strong percentage, obviously the other 75% are through the early process, I think it's important to note that we are establishing and fulfilling some institutional priorities at that point in time, including, of course, our athletics recruits, including having students from all kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds at Duke, And so just to note that early decision, I think for a long time has been viewed as something that is an opportunity for students who are comfortable that their families can afford to come to Duke, whereas now that pool has shifted quite a bit, and certainly students who are applying for need-based aid who are not part of those two populations would also be able to use things like the net price calculator and so forth to get a sense of how Duke fits for their families. But I did want to note that institutional priorities, of course, are part of all of our admissions decisions, but in particular, those two in the early decision process.
If I
Next
may
slide.
add, so
Yes,
Kathy has
sure.
given a totally accurate statistic that about 75% of our recruited athletes were admitted through early decision this year. But I really want to put a raw number on this too, because I think especially at this time of year, look, we're really happy that it's March and we are nationally and internationally visible, especially during this month of the year through our men's and women's basketball teams and their success. But I do want to emphasize that despite Duke's high profile athletic program, only about 10% of our undergraduate students at Duke are athletes. And so we are finalizing all of our decisions now, but my best guess is that about 165 or so of our approximately 1,750 to 1,800 first year students will be recruited athletes. So less than 10%.
Thank you for sharing that. That's important, Anne. And I did see one of my colleagues note, and I should note that we do have a team of colleagues behind the scenes helping answer questions. So if you do have questions as we go, we're going to address some that you sent us ahead of time shortly. But if you do have questions, please feel free to put them in Q&A. Not only do we have some wonderfully skilled colleagues behind the scenes, but I would say that 4 or 5 of them were actually school counselors at one point or another. And so they certainly can understand where your questions come from and the lens through which you're asking. We'll go
And
to the
we thank
next.
you for your patience with our not providing exact numbers right now. It is precisely because we are still finalizing decisions rather than because we're trying to be elusive. We will have
Yes.
a press release as soon as everything is actually set and done. But for now, Kathy, can we share the target class size out loud?
Yes. So our target class size is about 1,775 students. It's a little bit larger than we have enrolled the past several years. I know that we went from class sizes of about 1,720 to about 1,750, and we are increasing the class size just a bit to certainly to bring in more talented students to Duke, but also to address some of those other institutional priorities that we talked about. We will continue to require all of our first year students to live on campus. We will also require students to live on campus 3 of their 4 years. So none of that is changing. We are not suddenly increasing our class and not providing the housing and other resources that students have long enjoyed at Duke. Next slide, please. All right, so here are some of the questions that came our way. I'll get us started, but Anne and I think, are going to toggle back and forth a bit on this. So the first question is that your students are often ask you about reasons they might not be admitted, despite coming from top institutions. They have great grades, they have great test scores. And then the question is asking, how do we make the tough decisions between applicants who only have slight differences in the strength of their applications? And what's interesting is that this already shows us in the way the question is worded that you understand. So we have very much that embarrassment of riches that I talked about. We have students who are just really taking outstanding courses from what's available to them. They are getting straight A's. They are testing, if they choose to report testing, in the 99th percentile. They are doing all kinds of incredible things in your community. They have unusual talents. So how do we decide? I'm going to be really honest and say the reality is that we do get to put those other lenses on, the context, the institutional priorities, but we also are human beings. And so what one committee may decide about a particular group of students could be very different than what another committee would decide. This is the very subjective nature of this process. And so it's not us looking at applicant A and saying yes or no. We're looking at your applicant compared to all the others. We're looking at your applicants and your students to see what is it that we think on that day in that committee that student would add to the Duke community? We do certainly appreciate the letters of recommendation that you and your teacher colleagues write. Those remain a critical part of our admissions evaluation. And they don't have to be long, poetic letters. I've seen more and more counselors moving and teachers moving to bulleted versions with some other important things added to them. And those are perfect. It's why we can't use AI to even analyze your letters, because we're getting a sense of who is this person? What is it that you're telling us about them? Similarly, a couple of years ago, we made news for noting, or some news, maybe locally at least, that we're no longer, quote, evaluating the essay. And what we meant by that was that are not issuing a rating or deciding if the writing is of a particular level or quality, which is why we don't use AI to read essays any more than we hope your students are using them to write their essays. But we are using those essays, both the long essay and their response to the why do question and any optional essays they choose to respond to let us get a sense of who they are, what's important to them. How does what they say about themselves match with what you and your colleagues say? How does it match what they have done in terms of their coursework, their grades, their hopes, their plans for the future? So it's really just those slight differences where students will stand out. And there's no way to predict what those slight differences might mean to one committee, to one college, because clearly your students are also applying to other colleges and will receive different kinds of decisions. But it's why we remain fully committed to evaluating every application as the human being and the person and the student and young person they are. Anna, would you like to go on to the second question? And
Sure.
I'll let you do the third too.
Thanks, Kathy. So for the second question, I'm going to tackle the second part first. What parts of the application do you find reveal the most about a student, who a student is? All of them. And it varies one application to the next. Which parts are most salient? Which parts really end up driving the decision most? But look, we are not interested in asking students or their advocates to do more, just simply to do more. Nor do we want to read more, just simply to read more. We have parts of the application because we believe they inform our decisions, and they do it differently from one student to the next. In terms of the first part of the question, what specific aspects of the application should students focus on to align with Duke's expectations? I'm going to acknowledge that I know this question comes from a really good place, and I'm going to answer it in a way that I hope you'll understand and agree with, although it is idealistic. I don't think a student should do anything to align with Duke's Duke's expectations. I think what a student should do is pursue academic and extracurricular and other interests that move them, that they want to, where they're curious, where they are eager to be involved. I think students should try to make a difference in their community, whether that's their school or a broader community. I think that students should fulfill their family responsibilities. I think that students should explore their kids, right? I think that they should be themselves and think seriously about the opportunities that colleges and universities present to them. I think they should reflect on those. And I think they should, in their applications, be specific about the reasons why, in this case, Duke, really feels like a match. And the ways in which they imagine they will take advantage of and contribute to Duke. We are not looking for anyone to follow a secret formula. I think all of you know that really, really well, but we can't say it enough times. And in fact, the students who seem to have tried to follow that formula often end up doing the exact opposite of what I think they intend to do, because they don't distinguish themselves. So we're looking for students who have the curiosity and the courage to really approach this process in an earnest way, to be strategic about how they lay out where they apply early, or whether they apply early action somewhere else in a regular decision to Duke. We expect them to be strategic in the ways that they explore colleges. But what we're looking for in the application itself isn't strategy. What we're looking for in the application itself is a reflection of a real human being who might be a great addition to our community. Forgive me for answering very, very broadly, but that's the truth. How does Duke approach financial aid for international students during regular decision? The same way we do during early decisions. So the policy is exactly the same for foreign citizens who are requesting financial aid as indicated by the question on the common application. We do have a much more selective admissions process. Again, because we have institutional funding here and it is not unlimited, and because we have a promise to meet the full financial need of every student we offer admission to, we do have a more selective pool for this group. I can't tell you the exact admit rate right now. Again, we're finalizing decisions, but my best guess is that, well, I am confident that it will be less than half of the admit rate overall, probably well below 2%. It's really tough. Thank you to all of you who are advocates for this group of students. We are incredibly excited about the students to whom we will offer admission to Duke in this group. And again, we really appreciate and recognize how incredibly difficult this process can be for them, not just in terms of admit rate, but in terms of navigating the process itself. So thank you to all of you for working with them. And please know that we are so excited about them joining our class. They're a small group, and we want to make sure that we can support every single one of them once they're admitted.
So let me go to the first question here. Students who are deferred in early decision, what additional factors or updates tend to make the biggest difference when their applications are reviewed again? The number one thing will be mid-year grades. And it's not that that will be what distinguishes among early decision students, but it is critical that your students maintain strong mid-year grades pretty much in every subject, particularly in those of interest to them academically. So that's going to be our starting point. It's kind of the number one thing we look at. Students are invited in their defer Q&As that they get when they receive that deferral decision to send us a letter of continued interest where they can send us updates. And I have noted that most students do that. So those two things are the two most important things that they can do. Beyond that, I think what it really comes to is there is nothing that they can do to make themselves stand out at that point in time. We are going to be looking at them in the context of the regular decision pool, the students who we are admitting from their school, if there are others, if the students are admitting from their state or region, and then the pool as a whole. So we really are going to be seeing exactly what it is that makes them stand out. Clearly, our early decision pool was talented because if you see that about 15% of our students who were deferred will be admitted in the regular decision process. And so we recognize that they are really talented, but we also remain committed to keeping plenty of spaces available, at least during regular decision, for students to be considered at that point in time. Go ahead, Anne. I'll let you do the next one.
If my student is placed on the waiting list, when can they expect to hear from your office? And is there anything they can do to increase their chances of acceptance? We don't know yet. In a tradition, following a traditional calendar, as you are all well aware, most waiting list activity will begin in May. In recent years, we have been able to offer some waitlisted students places in the class as early as mid to late April. We'd love to do that again if we can, if we are confident, because the vast majority of students who are offered admission at Duke, and probably most other places as well, wait until close to May 1st to accept their place. It's really difficult for us to predict whether we will be able to turn to the waitlist to make more admissions offers. So this is our plea to you. For the students you're working with, as soon as they are sure, once they know which offer they plan to accept, whether it's Duke or somewhere else, please encourage them to respond quickly. If we have the majority of our responses earlier in April, we can then turn to the waitlist even before May 1st. But that remains to be seen. As an important note, Duke does not have an enrollment deposit of any sort, but we recognize that other schools do, and that this can be a financial burden for families. And so this is one of the reasons why, if we are able to admit students from the waitlist in April, we're eager to do that to help them avoid forfeiting a deposit at another place. But at Duke, we do not have an admissions or enrollment deposit of any sort. Is there anything that waitlisted students can do to increase their chances of acceptance? This is really similar to the question that Kathy just answered about what deferred students could do. So if there are any grade updates, if there are any updates about recent accomplishments, if students, upon reflecting on their admissions decisions, feel differently about Duke and the scheme of their college choices, and more eager to enroll than they did when they originally applied, all of those things are helpful. We will send very specific or provide very specific FAQs for waitlisted students about exactly how they can and should communicate any additional information. And of course, we're happy to hear from you if you'd like to add anything to their application. We welcome that information as well. But TBD, it is too soon to tell exactly when and exactly how many. But we're hopeful, and the students to whom we plan to offer the opportunity to be on the wait list are students we really are excited about having at Duke if the space is there.
And I believe this might be our last question, and it kind of touches on, as we talk about the wait list, as we talk about pretty much everything we covered today, which is, as a counselor, it might be really difficult when you have a student whose profile at one time would have been very easily an admit to Duke, perhaps at least a wait list, and then your student gets the deny decision, and it kind of leaves you reeling a bit. So, why has it changed? How has it changed? And I think it's really just a matter of volume. We have so many wonderful students applying. Uh, you know, whether or not there is grade inflation out there, whether at the secondary school and the college level is a conversation for another day. But it does become harder and harder to distinguish among really, really qualified students. And so that's often what leads us to having to make these very, very difficult deny decisions when students are absolutely well prepared and well qualified to come to Duke. I recognize that we are at 12:29. We're just about a minute away from the end of the time that we had allotted for the program. Do want to note a couple of things. There are some wonderful questions in the Q&A. We have recorded this session. It will be posted. You are welcome to send us your questions at undergrad-admissions@duke.edu. We will try to get to those. We always have some staff members online answering those. We also are hoping in the coming weeks, and maybe making this a regular series, to do a bit of a counselor only Ask Me Anything with our wonderful staff of so many former counselors. We hope to do some additional webinars to answer questions that we weren't really able to get to today about the admissions process, about the things that you can be doing to help your students make the best case for themselves, not just at Duke, but at any other colleges to which they're applying. So again, on behalf of Anne and me, unless Anne wants to add some parting words, we really appreciate your taking the time. Appreciate my staff, the staff members behind the scenes helping answer your questions. And again, apologize that we were not able to get to all of the questions that you put in the chat. But thank you again. Thank you for all you do. We are always here to help wherever we can. And thanks again for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for being on the front lines in the days to come.